To celebrate Tolkien Reading Day as a seminarian for the Diocese of Lexington, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Catholic life of J.R.R. Tolkien. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien began his life as an Anglican, but when he was 8 years old, following his mother's conversion, he himself became a member of the Catholic Church. His mother died shortly after when he was 12 years old, and he was raised by a Catholic priest named Francis Morgan in the Birmingham Oratory. That time in the depths of the church and learning so closely to a priest stayed with him throughout his entire life, and you can really see it in his works. Today I'd like to read an excerpt from his book, The Silmarillion. It was compiled after his death by his son, but taken from his notes that he had as he created this entire world that would become known as Middle-earth. In particular, I would like to read his Genesis section called Ainulindale, which is the Genesis story that he has for this Old Testament for the Lord of the Rings. It's translated as the music of the Ainur, or the Holy Ones. There was Eru, the one, who in Arda is called Iluvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but a few together, while the rest hearkened, for each comprehended only that part of the mind of Iluvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding, and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Iluvatar called together all the Ainur, and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Iluvatar and were silent. Then Iluvatar said to them, Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have enkindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will. But I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song. Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes, and pipes and trumpets, and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Iluvatar to a great music, and a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies, woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depths and into the flowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Iluvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Iluvatar after the end of days. Then the themes of Iluvatar shall be played aright, and take being in the moment of their utterance. For all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each, and Iluvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. But now Iluvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Iluvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame, for desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own, and it seemed to him that Iluvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Iluvatar. But being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord rose about him, and many that sang nigh him grew despondent, and their thought was disturbed, and their music faltered. But some began to attune their music to his, rather than to the thought which they had at first. Then the discord of Melkor spread ever wider, and the melodies which had been heard before foundered in a sea of turbulent sound. But Iluvatar sat and hearkened until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm, as of dark waters that made war one upon another in an endless wrath that would not be assuaged. Then Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled, and he lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme, and it gathered power and had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended with it. And again there was a war of sound more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others. For it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. And it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain, and endlessly repeated, and it had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison, as of many trumpets braying upon a few notes. And it essayed to drown the other music by the violence of its voice, but it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other, and woven into its own solemn pattern. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Iluvatar shook and a tremor ran out into the silence yet unmoved, Iluvatar arose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. Then he raised up both his hands, and in one chord, deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Iluvatar, the music ceased. Then Iluvatar spoke, and he said, Mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor. But that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Iluvatar, those things that ye have sung, I will show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, in which he himself hath not imagined. In this selection from the Silmarillion, we see the Judeo-Christian Genesis story taken into a different tone. Tolkien was very heavily influenced by Norse mythology and the study of language. And for the Silmarillion and for his work, The Lord of the Rings, he created his own Elvish languages, his own Dwarvish languages, and this in particular was from the mind of the elves. The Ainur are very much like our own angels. And the other very important thing to note here is that there is but one God. Given the pagan nature of many of his works, we might expect to see a pantheon of gods. But even amongst the Ainur that he has, they all owe their allegiance to one true God, Iluvatar. Through him, they're given the secret fire, the imperishable flame. This is very much similar to the Holy Spirit that we believe in as Christians. We also see that there's this character Melkor, who very much resembles Satan. As he decides that he wants to increase his own power despite already being the most powerful of the Ainur, we see mirrored this act of Satan and his desiring of his own power in order to surpass that of the powers that would be given to mankind. Interestingly, Melkor doesn't just get away with it. And also, Iluvatar seeks to use his discord in order to create a more beautiful music. To borrow the words of St. Augustine, this is Tolkien's own happy fault. The same way that God the Father used the miseries that Satan has woven into the world as the impetus for the incarnation, and that we might see the glory of the cross, Tolkien used this discord sown by Melkor as the impetus for all of the things that would later be shown in The Lord of the Rings. And his ultimate and overarching message throughout all of his works is that the one God will always bring the best good out of every tragedy. No matter the catastrophes that we face, we can trust in him to make all things right.